Well, joining us now is an Army veteran of 25 years service, an advisor to top four-star generals and senior leaders in the US Army, the chair of the Modern War Institute at West Point, and co-director of the Urban Warfare Project. He's a scholar, writer, speaker, and veteran who just made his third trip since October the 7th to Israel to research IDF tactics in urban warfare for the United States. It's a pleasure to welcome John Spencer back to Stand With Us TV. John, thank you for being with us on Stand With Us TV.
Thanks for having me back, Michael.
And so tell us about your recent visit to Israel and also your visit inside Gaza. What insights were you able to gather?
Well, it was my third visit to Israel and to Gaza, actually, since October 7th. Just continuing my research on the different phases of the operations in the IDF, meeting with both political leaders, but really embedding with the IDF, with the division commanders, hearing from them on how the fight has gone, the progress, their mission. And I traveled with the 99th into the Netzarim corridor, into central Gaza. I went to where the U.S. pier used to be, and talked to brigade commanders, battalion commanders about the challenges they're facing now in the different missions, as they're slowly, methodically accomplishing the goals. I also met with the Orkets unit to talk about the dog capabilities. As my research in urban warfare, but also in underground warfare, progresses in ensuring that the lessons are being learned, but also the unique challenges that the IDF faced, uh, that's part of my research.
And of course, when Hamas attacked Israel 9 months ago and war broke out, Prime Minister Netanyahu outlined those three goals: destroy Hamas, number one; number two, free all the hostages; and number three, ensure that Gaza can never threaten Israel again. And so, 9 months into the war, how close is Israel to those goals?
I think it's very close, but there's and as another big part, kind of a research theme that I was trying to get an assessment as there have been all these false accusations that Israel is losing, a strategic defeat. As a strategist, that's definitely not. By every metric of the three goals Israel set, I think Israel is winning in Gaza, from returning the hostages through the use of military and diplomatic pressure, destroying Hamas. No, that doesn't mean destroy Hamas as an idea. It means removing Hamas as the governing power of Gaza and dismantling its military capability, its leadership, its organized formations, its tunnels, its weapons supplies. The IDF are very surprisingly, very effectively have started to dismantle that capability. Also, with the securing the borders, which was a big part of my research, what that means. What does the new security framework between Israel and Gaza look like? By every metric, that they've accomplished things that I didn't think were possible at this rate. But by definition of who's winning, who's losing, it will require phases of the operation. So I think Israel is very close, and they've said this, but sometimes people get mixed, hung up on the wording. Israel is very close from transitioning out of high intensity combat to break apart organized formations of the Hamas military wing and transitioning into this lower intensity phase. This is the understanding that in order to achieve a strategic victory in Gaza, the Israel and the IDF will have to be a part of who replaces Hamas, as in the security framework of the different ideals of what the day after looks like. But for me, that is the second phase. The first phase of any war is always remove the power and dismantle its military capability, so it doesn't have that capability to wage war against Israel, to conduct mass casualty events. Everybody, matter of fact, a lot of people have gotten it wrong and think this is a counterterror campaign, and you have to fight the ideal of Hamas. Eventually, you do. That's in phase two, where you do de-radicalization strategies, reconciliation strategies, the rebuilding, the clear hold build, the hold and build part of that. that comes after removing the power from an area and its organized military capabilities, which the IDF have been very effective at. Of course, I think, yes, you could say it could have been done differently. The United States would have absolutely done it Gaza differently. It would have done it with overwhelming force, more combat power, aggressively achieve the goal quickly. You pushed like Egypt to establish a humanitarian zone outside of Gaza. Many ways, but that's not the context in which this war has had to be fought in. So I'm significantly surprised at the progress and achievements of the IDF, despite the context in which the war, which is all wars, the political context and all the resources and the complexity of Hezbollah in the north, Iran attacking, and all these other factors.
And related to those goals, of course, we've heard over the weekend of high profile targets being taken out by the IDF. Rafa al-Salame, the commander of Hamas's Khan Yunis brigade, being one of them. He was one of the masterminds behind the October the 7th massacre. He commanded over plans for the development of the tunnels in Khan Yunis. And of course, Mohammed Daif, the architect of the October 7th massacres and of multitudes of terror attacks in Israel. What's the impact of the elimination of these big names in Hamas?
I think the impact cannot be understated because those are, when you assess a military capability, right, a power, right, the reason Hamas can rule is that it has both indirect and direct power over the population and military capability. Taking out the leadership of Hamas is an important part of dismantling its power architecture. Yes, you have to get to the military infrastructure and these high level commanders that are also part of the military wing, like a brigade commander, which is huge, of Khan Yunis. It's breaking apart military capability. So when some uninformed analyst says, Hamas recruitment is up, like that is an irrelevant statistic because of the fact that Hamas was a military on October 7th with vast capability. Experienced commanders like these are an important part of combat power. So this is why we've seen just last week the IDF conducting larger raids against a much weaker Hamas force. 20 buildings being surrounded. They don't have their escape tunnels so they can run away and not fight. They don't have some of the bigger military capabilities. They don't have the organized, experienced, and these leaders like this. So Hamas has gotten weaker significantly, and this gets to the estimates of how effective the IDF has. So yes, those killings of those leaders who have run scared like rats, but still tried to organize operations and to maintain the will of all the rank and file fighters who are hiding. That's a big part of also getting to the goal of war, which is it's never to destroy every member of the other militaries, the enemy militaries. Never is to destroy their will to fight. And some of these leaders that are trying to escape and still run an underground military are a significant part of the enemy's will to fight. Why? That's a big part of war as well. And again, when you get into this other phase, once that military doesn't have the capability, then you get to these counter-terror, de-radicalization, reconciliation, new power constructs.
And much talk of a potential hostage deal. Now, we've seen Israeli negotiation teams in Doha and in Cairo. What makes a hostage deal more likely at this point from Hamas's point of view?
I think it's the real military pressure, right? Each side has its interest, and this is the ideal that Hamas would have negotiated for any hostages without levers of pressure on them, as we saw with Gilad Shalit for 5 years. It has been through the use of the IDF, through real military pressure, that led to the first hostage negotiation and is leading to the second one, where now the pressure is real and Hamas is trying to figure out any strategy it can to remain in power in Gaza with some capability. So the likelihood of another temporary pause, a hostage negotiation, is through the combination of real military pressure in dismantling Hamas to where it has to do a negotiation. And along with the diplomatic pressure, as it tries to, the enemy always gets a vote, tries to figure out a strategy to survive, which is its strategic goal, just survive in Gaza as an entity with power. So you again, an ideal can always be there, but with power. So I think that the negotiation deal is very likely because of that military pressure.
Let's turn our attention to the north for a moment. Recently, the IDF's Northern Command and Operations Directorate released an approved battle plans, obviously not details, but approved battle plans for Lebanon following intensified fighting with Hezbollah. We've seen from Hezbollah non-stop rocket fire, the continued release of drone footage of northern Israel. What do you make of the timing of all of this, and what do you see as potential next steps?
I mean, the timing is, of course, the opportunist timing of Hezbollah, who wouldn't dare have attacked without this complexity of the war in Gaza. On October 8th, it began this attack and has launched thousands of rockets, all fully warranting a full-scale war of self-defense against them, but they're opportunists who believe in their rationale that there's a certain bar in which their attacks will be acceptable. But I do believe they're rational actors, where people try to put rational actor theory on Hamas, who says, I want all my population to die to achieve my, psychological goal of the destruction of Israel. In the north, even the IDF statement of an improved plan is another form and another attempt, since this has been the goal of deterrence, diplomatic signaling, like, look, you're coming to a decision point, Hezbollah, where if you continue attacks, Israel will be forced to use military force against. Israel has to repopulate its northern border. No other country would be required to accept this level of attacks for this long, to not have 80 to 100,000 citizens homeless for this long because of fears of escalation. But this is again why Gaza is so connected to the overall complexity of Israel's decisions, is that Hezbollah says it's attacking because Israel is in Gaza. Once Israel achieves that first phase of dismantling major military capabilities, it can transition into a different phase and say that we've achieved this goal, this victory, this war aim, and we're transitioning into lower intensity operations, rebuilding, establishing new power, which will give Hezbollah, most thinking, an opportunity. Okay, this is a decision point. Do you, in your own mind, call some victory on your end while we reestablish the deterrence that is needed in the north? And October 7th, lots of lessons. The IDF, the Israel security framework. Yes, the IDF needs to be strengthened, needs to be maybe larger. A lot of the thinking to include in security, but Hezbollah gets to make decisions in this as well. And everybody hopes. I don't like the terms of they don't want escalation. Everybody hopes that Hezbollah will make a decision to stop attacking Israel, and then you have the Iranian vote, because Hezbollah is Iran's major proxy for what it envisions of the future of its destruction of Israel, and through Israel, the destruction of the United States. But this is the complexity of strategy that Israel has been faced with. It isn't a black and white decision of cut your losses here, fight the real enemy. It's all interconnected, but we're hitting a decision point, and Israel has said this, and others, a decision point where Hezbollah gets to make a decision, and that signals of Israel's strength and preparedness to do what's needed to defend itself, to reestablish its borders, to return a sense of safety to its citizens, fully prepared to do it. But Hezbollah gets the decision. Now, whether that's geographic, it backs up to the Litani River, all these other variables that are there, but we're approaching a very imminent decision point.
And of course, you're an expert in urban warfare. So, in each case, you see how it happens, and in recent history, how it's reported and the response to it worldwide. What surprised you by the global reaction to this specific war?
Oh, I've gotten surprised since day one. Like calling Gaza the most densely populated place on earth when it's not. Like the allowance of ideals about the law of war when you have a nation like Israel following every law of war, every measure that's ever been created to prevent civilian harm, and then creates new ones, and they're accused of intentionally causing civilian harm. I've been significantly surprised as an urban warfare scholar who knows what ever came before Israel's war against Hamas in Gaza, which was started by Hamas on October 7th. In urban terrain, the idea that you could do it with not a lot of destruction when you have a prepared defense for over 15 years, 400 miles of tunnels, when you have the world saying the 2,000-pound bomb is a weapon that can never be used in urban terrain. I'm so surprised that these ideals that have been out in the human rights community for a long time get real national policy implications when they're separated from the realities of urban combat and have actually created the situation where you have combatants like Hamas who not only use human shields and what we call lawfare, where they turn every protected object in an entire territory, every hospital, every school, every mosque into a military purposed building so it can be protected from attack of even when the attacking military has a moral code, follows the law of war. These ideals about what can happen in urban combat will pull future warfare into urban areas because any weaker force, especially one who doesn't follow the laws of war, sees the advantage on the international stage, on the international condemnation, on in the halls of the United Nations. It sees the advantage of the dilemma it causes for the world. Like, this is awful. We don't want this. We don't see this level of destruction. We don't want to see somebody using a population and trying to get civilians hurt. But by saying all these things about what should or could be happening in urban combat, these communities are actually pulling urban war into urban areas to where you would see more of this rather than a military following the law of war and being accused of ridiculous things like genocide and believing the human or the civilian casualty number coming from a terrorist organization that can't be true, is not true, that you could ever have a number during a battle. There's so many surprises that I think, of course, are problematic because they are wrapped in anti-Semitism. They are wrapped in anti-Israel ideals, because I've never seen the strength of these ideals in any other war in any other period. But they're so problematic if people don't understand that what you're saying about what the standard that you're trying to hold Israel to, which isn't a double standard, it's a standard that doesn't exist. That means for other Western militaries who are, even if they're in a fight of survival on their borders, you're saying that they can't fight back. They can't even follow the law of war and execute a very discriminate, very constrained operation because the costs are too much. These people, these groups, these advocates are actually causing more harm by trying to create a standard and hold Israel to a standard that doesn't exist.
Certainly high stakes there for all of Israel's allies. And just finally, you've come on a professional basis to Israel. As you said many times, you spent time with our fighting forces who have, of course, been fighting since October the 7th. That's 9 months. And you've studied the massacres of October the 7th in detail. We've discussed it on previous shows. And of course, on your podcast, you go through it methodically. I wondered, though, what was your analysis of the people you met, the fighters themselves, those soldiers? Are they up for the continued fight?
Absolutely. War is a contest of will, and whether I meet with in this trip, I went to, the hostage square, listened to the families of the hostages. I went to different areas where the veterans who have lost fellow soldiers, their views. One of the consensus to include from my visit, not in December of 2023 to February to this past week, is that the resolve and the will to continue to fight is there, and which is really important in a democracy. That, of course, the enemy attacks not just the military, which Hamas has not had no idea of fighting the IDF. They're trying to attack the will of even the Israeli population to continue to fight, because of the cost, right? To have a reserve force mobilized, fighting in such a difficult context, it wears at the will of the people. But in all my, both with individual soldiers in the field who are very disciplined, very focused on the task that they've been given, understands the restraints on the use of force, to the everyday civilians who are, of course, frustrated by it all, but the will to continue to fight because they know it's actually an existential fight, and visiting a nation who's in a real existential fight, and the complexities of that, because everybody has, ideals and are frustrated about, well, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do with that? But the collectively, from the individual soldier to political leaders to everyday Israelis, I felt that very solid will and understanding of this is, we have to do these things. We have to establish, and keep the will to continue to fight.
Absolutely. Well, John Spencer, we value your service, your expertise, your analysis, and your voice. Thank you so much for being with us once again on Stand With Us TV.
Thank you.